Hey guys, it's Katie. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to our next recent reads video. It's been a little while. I'm sorry. This is the first time I've had energy drinks in like 2 weeks and I already opened it. If you're new to my channel, recent reads are what I do now instead of my monthly wrap-ups. Dean! My cat's been crying a lot today. Even though I bought him new toys and gave him new treats today. Now he's just spoiled. It's been a little while since we did a recent read, so I actually have 8 to talk about with you today. I usually do this by every 5 books. But you'll see in a little bit why I'm just gonna do all 8 in this video. We have an interesting mix. I've read, in this batch, I have some of my favorite books that I've read all year. So we have some really good ones to talk about. I have a couple that were just like but I think we have a lot of like good discussion books. There's much to talk about, so we're just gonna get straight into it. A couple of things to get out of the way here at the beginning. If you're watching this before November 8th, I would appreciate it so much if you would go vote in the Goodreads Choice Awards. I guess you could do that even if it's after November 8th. So if you go to the poetry category, you can do a write-in vote for my book, Poems for the End of the World. If you're watching this after November 8th, if enough people voted for poems before then, it should show up as an option in the next round, so you can still go vote for it. So I'd appreciate it if you would vote for me. And then also thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video. If you're unfamiliar with Book of the Month, they're a monthly subscription service that gives you an option of which book you want to receive every month. So you go onto their website, they have 5 different picks of all different genres that you can choose from, and you get one shipped straight to your door, free shipping, $15, a brand new hardcover. I'm gonna have a link down below in my description that you can use along with a code if you want to get your first box for just $10 and free shipping, which is a great deal. All of their picks are vetted and they have a really wide variety of genres, so there's something for everybody's taste, and you know all of their picks are gonna be good. And Book of the Month was kind enough to send me all of their November picks so I can show you what they have for this month. So the first one we have is contemporary fiction called The Star-Crossed Sisters of Tuscany escape to the Italian countryside in this hopeful family drama about love, a curse, and second chances. Their next pick is a romance book called This Time Next Year. This description is so cute. He was born with a silver spoon, she had a chip on her shoulder, and fate just won't stop bringing them together. This next one I'm sure is gonna look familiar to you. I have heard, like, everyone that I follow has been talking about this book lately. It's a young adult debut novel called These Violent Delights. It's a take on Romeo and Juliet in 1926 in Shanghai, and it includes forbidden love, feuding families, and a plague on everyone's houses. And then we have some literary fiction called Memorial. This is supposed to be both funny and heartbreaking, and it's an intimate portrayal of an imperfect relationship that explores the highs and lows of love. And of course, I saved the thriller for last. The thrillers are always my favorite. This is a debut and an early release, so you can get this book before it comes out if you get it from Book of the Month, and it's called Pretty Little Wife. Till Death Do Us Part gets a whole new meaning in this twisted domestic suspense about a dead husband gone missing. So he's dead and he's missing. The little tagline is there's more than one way to end a marriage. Dun dun dun. Shouldn't a dead husband stay dead? I'm intrigued. So yeah, make sure to go check out that link down below in my description if you want to try Book of the Month this month for $9.99. I think they have a lot of great picks this month. And without further ado, let's get into my recent reads. So I'm gonna be real with you. I've been putting off making this video because sometimes there's books that I just like don't have a lot to say about, and I feel like this pressure on BookTube to give you these like in-depth coherent reviews, and then it's just not fun for me to film. So there's a couple of these that honestly it's either been a while since I've read them or they're just underwhelming and I don't have a lot to say about, and I'd rather spend time talking about the books that I have a lot to talk about. So anyway, the first book we have is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. This was our book club pick, I think, for August. That's how long it's been since we've made one of these videos. And this was actually one of my most anticipated books of the year because I have loved Elizabeth Acevedo's other books. And this one, I was just underwhelmed by. Not even underwhelmed, it's just like, I don't know. I didn't like it as much as I liked her previous ones, but there wasn't anything technically wrong with it. So in this one, we're following 2 sisters who don't know about each other. They don't know that they're sisters. One's in New York and one's in the Dominican, and they have the same father who flies back and forth to see them. And he has these 2 families. And their father dies in a plane crash, and his death ends up making them aware of each other. So this is definitely like an emotional book, character driven, and it's also written in verse. And I think my main problem with this one was that I listened to the audiobook and I wish I would have just read it physically. I can see why people love it so much, but for whatever reason, I was just never really that invested in any of the characters or the story. So it's definitely my least favorite of hers so far. I'm still gonna read pretty much everything that she publishes, but this one just wasn't for me for whatever reason. After that, I reread Blood Promise by Rochelle Mead for my Vampire Academy reread. There's a whole spoilery reading vlog up with this if you want to see that. I've been a little disappointed doing my reread of Vampire Academy because I read them for the first time when I was like 16 and I loved them, and so now rereading them this time around, whenever I'm like not enjoying it as much as I did the first time or as much as I'm expecting to, I just like get disappointed. So that's kind of why I've been slowing down with my reread, and I still haven't read the 5th book. So Blood Promise, especially reading it this time around, I like was more aware of the issues of the book than I was when I read it for the first time. I still enjoyed it. You can go watch my reading vlog if you want like my specific thoughts on it, but I didn't realize how like distinctly split down the middle the book is. Like the first half and the second half feel like two completely different books. So the second half, fantastic. Loved. But the first half was much slower and more like meandering, and nothing really happens than I remembered. The best thing about this book though is we meet Sydney's character, and I forgot that she was introduced in this book, and she went on to be my favorite character, and she's the main character of the spin-off series Bloodlines, which I love. So that was the redeeming factor, and then also the second half of the book was still really good. But rereading it took me a while because I wasn't like super into it. I still want to continue my reread. I know I get questions about that all the time, but it's not a priority and I'm not rushing into that. But I'm so glad that I reread it. The audiobook was really weird. I don't know if I would recommend that if you want to read it. You can tell that it was produced like a long time ago because it's an older book, because it has all of these weird sound effects in the audiobook and like background music behind the narrator talking, and there's this like weird, there's ghosts in the book, and so whenever the ghosts come into the scene, the music's like ooh. And it's so bad. Overall, I still love the series. Would still recommend you read it, but not on audio. Okay, so the next one we have to talk about is one that I actually have thoughts on, and that was Beach Read. So this is an adult romance book about two writers. So they knew each other in college, so they were kind of like rivals, and our main character goes to stay at her father's beach house after he passes away, and the guy is next door, and that's how they kind of rekindle. And they're both struggling really badly with writer's block, and they can't write their next book, so they end up making a challenge for each other to swap genres, because he writes these like really serious literary books and she writes steamy romances. And okay, I have seen all of the criticism in the world for this book. I don't even care. This was so freaking cute. I finished it in like a day. I haven't been that like into a book and that like into a relationship and a romance. It was fun, maybe just because I'm a writer, so that element was really fun for me, but it was just so freaking cute. I loved their banter. I loved that. Don't go into it just expecting it's going to be like a cutesy beach read, which you would expect from the cover and the title. This one definitely has darker themes to it, and I think it's a little bit heavier than some people were expecting. I've seen other people say that they don't like her writing style. I personally really liked it. I really vibed with it. Like I said, I finished it in like a couple of days, and whenever I wasn't reading it, I was thinking about it and thinking about when's the next time I'm going to be able to pick up this book again. So this was like fast to read and cute, but I also found it really touching and heartwarming and sweet. I don't want to say like too much about it because I don't want to spoil all of the little reveals in the book, because I think those were really fun. But sometimes I have a hard time with like the hate to love romances because I'm not as forgiving typically as the main character. So when the love interest does something that's just like not okay, I can't get past that and then support the relationship. So this was one of the few times when like a hate to love romance like didn't put me off and I could fully get on board with the relationship, if that makes sense. I thought this was so funny, so charming, so quick and fun to read. Couldn't recommend it enough if you like romance. I'm gonna do something super cheesy right now. If you've made it this far in the video and if you're enjoying it, I would appreciate it so much if you would give it a thumbs up because it helps out my channel a ton. And if you're new here, you should subscribe and stick around. That's all. So after that, I read The Shadows by Alex North, and this was our book club pick, I think, for September. And this book, I have such a love-hate relationship with. If you watched the vlogs I was making at the time, you can kind of see my opinion of this book change so drastically. It started out so good. I was loving it for the first like 25%, maybe half, and then it all just kind of fell apart. Basically, I think it had so much potential and it had a really interesting premise, but I didn't like the way that things panned out. So basically, this book is about this kid named Charlie who kind of forms this like group of kids who can lucid dream, but in their lucid dreams, they basically murder people. And then when this happened and someone dies, Charlie disappears and he's never seen again. So then there's these like communities online popping up who believe that he like did something supernatural and was able to like legitimately disappear. So there's these like copycats who are now doing what he did in the past, committing other murders to try to copy him. So we're following Paul, who knew Charlie as a kid when this was all happening, and now he's an adult. And so the beginning of the book, it had this like dark, ominous tone. I thought maybe it was gonna go into like the supernatural, paranormal, but I would have been okay if it hadn't. But overall, I just found this to be an underwhelming thriller. I listened to this on audiobook and I did enjoy the audiobook, so if you're gonna read that, that might be something to explore. I know a lot of people in my book club liked this more than I did, so you might like this a lot more than I did. For whatever reason, I was just severely underwhelmed and let down by this one. I was just hoping it was going to be something really spooky and really creepy, and it just like didn't end up giving me those Halloween vibes that I wanted. It wasn't horrible. I'm not really doing star ratings for books anymore, but if I were to give this one, it'd probably be like a 3.5 stars. But the book that I read after that was The Night Swim. Oh my gosh. Seriously? Sorry, The Night Swim was our book club pick for September. So that means The Shadows was August. Clap When You Land was July. It's been so long! Anyway, The Night Swim was fabulous. This was another thriller. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. This one is following this girl who runs a true crime podcast. So basically she picks like a criminal case and lets the listeners kind of be like a jury box, and they try to determine if people are guilty or not guilty. And up until now, each season has followed a case that has already been concluded, and she's kind of like digging back up. But this season, she's deciding to cover a trial as it's happening. And instead of doing like a murder or something, she's following a rape trial. And so the book is following 2 different timelines. One's in the past about a different girl, and then the current timeline with her following this rape trial. So basically, we're following 2 different rape storylines. So, yeah, Dean? Yeah. Okay. Can you let me finish? So for one thing, would highly recommend the audiobook. It was fantastic because the book switches off between like the narration and everything, and then these bits of her podcast, and it sounds like a podcast and has all of these sound effects and stuff. I thought it was really well done. But the one thing I want to say about this book is I found this like deeply upsetting. So if you think reading this is going to trigger you in any way, if reading about rape bothers you, I just found this book like deeply upsetting. Like I thought it was super well done and really, really good, but it was hard to read at times. So just go in knowing that. And it's not even just like one upsetting scene, it's this like unsettling feeling throughout the whole book. And there are times when it is much worse than others, but it's like I felt nauseous the entire book. There were a couple of twists in here that I definitely didn't call. Always love that with thrillers. But more than anything, just like the social commentary on the slut shaming and just the way that rape trials are conducted in comparison to like literally any other trial was just so spot on, which is probably why it was so upsetting. So I think it's a really smart book. I think it's a really important book. I think it brings up a lot of really good arguments and a lot of really good discussions. So yeah, despite this being super upsetting, this is definitely one of my favorite books that I've read so far this year. Would really, really recommend this one. I really liked the way that the 2 timelines kind of pulled in together. If you think you can handle the subject matter, you should read this book for sure. So next we have, I started reading a serial recently. So it's a 4-part serial, and I wasn't sure if I should talk about it until I was done with it, or if I should talk about each part separately, but I've read the first 2. So I'm halfway through the serial, so I figured we could talk about those 2. And that is the Charly Travesty serial by Jesse Elliott and KJ Sutton. So I've read the first 2 parts, which is, the first one is A Whisper in the Dark, and the second one is A Light in the Dusk. So this is a vampire serial, and our main character is Charlotte Travesty, Charly Travesty, and she is a vampire, and she's a part of this royal family. And in this world, when you come of age, like your eye color changes, and that determines kind of where you go in society. And lavender eyes are a sign of someone being half human, half vampire, and they are basically the most hated beings in society. They like have no rights. You could literally murder them and it's not against the law. So we start out following this spoiled, comfortable vampire princess, Charlotte, who wakes up on her awakening with violet eyes, and suddenly she's kicked out of her house. Her whole world is turned upside down, and she has to figure out where she's gonna go from there. So let's start with the first part, A Whisper in the Dark. Dean is here for the discussion. I loved the first part of this serial. I think I read it in one day. I couldn't put it down. Even when I wasn't reading it, I was thinking about it. I freaking loved the first part of this serial. Highly recommend. The time that I'm filming this, all of them are in Kindle Unlimited if you have that, if you want to read them. I loved the first part of this. It was exactly what I wanted. You guys know I love my vampires. I love my paranormal romances. This was so freaking fun. I loved it. It was everything that I was looking for. I thought the build up for this world was super interesting. We're introduced to a potential love interest in this first one who's a human, and his banter with Charly is super cute. Watching Charly try to figure out like how she's gonna survive now that she's a lavender was really interesting. This first part was perfect for me. Loved it. Then I moved on to part 2. And for whatever reason, I was looking at other people's reviews too, and everyone seemed to like part 2 more than they liked part 1. I could not be more opposite. I didn't really like part 2 very much. I had a lot of issues with part 2, which was really unfortunate coming out of like, I was riding this high out of part 1, and then I came to part 2, and there's not much I can say about part 2 without spoiling it, obviously. I just felt like certain things and certain characters were purely used for the plot, and then they forcing them to act in a way that seemed out of character, and that really irked me. This part has clearly set up for the plot to now go a certain way, which is fine, but it was disappointing for me as a reader a little bit. And for whatever reason, this second part just kind of lacked whatever that spark was for me in the first book. I wasn't as engaged with the writing. The story was still okay. I still read it really quickly, but I think I just didn't really like some of the character decisions, and I felt like the way that the plot was going was a little bit forced. However, with that said, I'm really invested in these characters and I'm really invested in the story, so I'm gonna finish it. I'm gonna read all 4 parts, but the second one wasn't as strong as the first one for me, but luckily that first one hooked me enough that I need to know what happened, so I'm gonna continue on. There were just a couple of things about this book that just felt like they were trying too hard, like forcing the plot, but also there's this one character who's kind of a caricature more than a character, and it's a very like stereotypical kind of cliche character in young adult, new adult, and I'm reading other people's reviews and everyone loves him and everyone's like all for it, and I'm just like, I thought every other character but him was more interesting and more well developed. Like, this guy just seems like they're trying to force on this stereotype on him, but everyone else seems to like it, so maybe that's just my problem. But anyway, I'm gonna read the other parts too, but part 2 I didn't like as much as I liked part 1, but overall, still like the story, still like the characters, gonna keep reading. And then finally, our last book to talk about for this video, I just finished it today, was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I freaking loved this book. It was so good. One of my favorites of the year, by far. Definitely my favorite V.E. Schwab book. So freaking good. It's one of those books that like, it's gonna be so memorable. Like, this is gonna stick with me. I'm gonna be thinking about this for a while. It is a longer book. It is more slow paced. It is more character driven. So it did take me literally all month to read it. However, I'm so freaking glad that I did. This was our book club pick for October. So thank you if you're watching this, if you're one of my Patreon book club members. Thank you for voting for this book, because I don't know how long it would have taken me to pick up this book if you hadn't. Basically, we're following our main character, Addie LaRue, and in the 1700s in France, she prays to one of the gods after dark, begging him to save her because she's about to be forced into this marriage that she doesn't really want and into this life that she wants no part of. And so this god grants her wish by making her basically immortal. She's gonna get to live forever, but the catch is no one is ever going to be able to remember her. Like, as soon as they turn away from her, a door closes between them. If they open it back up, they're not going to remember the conversation that they just had with her. And she can't say her name. She can't leave a mark in any way. Like, she can't write, she can't draw, she can't leave an impression of any kind. So we're jumping back and forth between all of these different timelines, from when she starts in like the 1700s in France to a present day timeline. And basically the god that she made the deal with, he gets named Luke in the book. He comes to visit her every year on their anniversary, basically telling her, give up, because the deal was she gets to live forever and have all of this freedom and do whatever she wants, but when she's done, he gets her soul. So now it's this game of like, she is miserable, this is a horrible way to live, but she doesn't want to let this guy win and have her soul. And I adored this book. It was fabulous. I would recommend the audiobook if you like audiobooks. It was really good. I don't know how much I can say without spoiling it, but I'm begging you, have some patience. Try to force yourself to have a longer attention span and stick with it. I don't even think you need to, honestly. I was hooked right away with the audiobook and I listened to the first 3 hours in one sitting. Like, I could not stop reading this, but don't go into this expecting it to be this like really fast-paced, plot-driven novel, because it's not. But it's not supposed to be. I know a lot of people have been talking about this on BookTube. I know people think it's overhyped or whatever. I think the hype is 100% warranted. I think V.E. Schwab did such a good job with this book. I think it was so well crafted. Everything was so well thought out. I loved the characters. I loved all of the different settings. I loved the writing style. Honestly, I can't think of anything to complain about. One of my favorites that I've read this year. You have to read it. It had such a satisfying end. You should read it. You should read it. So yeah, those are all of the books that I have finished lately. I'll have them all linked down below in the description if you want to go check them out. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're all doing well. I have a bunch of links down below in the description for other stuff too if you're interested. And I will just see you guys in my next video very, very soon. Bye.
So hit me. So hit me. so hit me. First a confession, with you I feel a connection. With